everyone, welcome. Thank you so kindly for joining us. My name is Car Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple, and tonight I am very glad to welcome Fernando Jr. or SKIZ to celebrate his book, The Chronicles of DOOM, Unraveling Rap's Masked Iconoclast. Let's give a hand for SKIZ. He is joined tonight by Tamara Palmer. Let's give a hand for Tamara. I'm really excited that we get to have you both here, that we get to hear about this book, that we get to hear about MF Doom, that you're all here to celebrate with us. This is a great day, guys. Okay. I wanted to say thank you all for joining us, both in person and also online. Hello, online people. We generally open each of our events with a land acknowledgement, and we will get to that shortly. But I do want to say just a special thank you to all of you for coming out this week, especially as we're still in like the heavy hangover of the US presidential election, and you might feel sad or scared or angry, any combination therein. And I can tell you that it makes me feel good to show up for artists and people that I believe in at a time like this, to show up for places I believe in, like independent bookstores. And I think this is how we lift each other up. This is how we make the world that we want, one step at a time. And so I really appreciate you guys being here when you could be anywhere in the world. Thank you so much. So, without further ado, we are broadcasting from San Francisco, California. We are operating on unceded Shoshone land, and we think that acknowledgement requires action. And so we encourage you to donate either your time or monetary means each time you hear a land acknowledgement. We have information about the Shoshone Land Trust at the back desk here, which is usually where I direct people if you're interested in how to participate in this project over nutrition. Brief business before I let these two take over. Now's a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. Yes, I love when people go for their pockets when I say that. Thank you so much. Is photo taking okay?
Of course.
Photo taking is okay. You got to go ahead. And encouraged even. Yes, that's great. Please do not take a call in the middle of the event. That is so embarrassing for you. Please don't do that. Please do check out our full event calendar on our website at greenapplebooks.com. We're wrapping up our fall season, but it's really great. We have really good stuff coming up, including the event that you are currently attending. So if you like what we have going on tonight, you might like what we have going on in the future. The restroom is behind me. It is available after the event and not during the event for obvious reasons. If you need to know how to get there, do let me know, and I'll gladly help you. We have copies of both of SKIZ's books at the front, or two of SKIZ's books rather, at the front register. You can find them there. If you've been here before, you have certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you support the writers who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you are able, we always appreciate it. Thank you so kindly. We have so many copies of this book because we are recommending it to so many people for the holiday season. So it's going to be like evergreen Green Apple on display constantly. Very happy about it. Thank you. Yay. And they're going to be signed. All right. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Tamara Palmer, who is the founder and co-producer of Music Book Club, an online community of authors and readers. She's the author of Country Fried Soul, Adventures of Dirty South Hip Hop, and will soon publish a collection of essays about Bay Area rap. Green Apple has been her favorite bookstore since before she could see over the counter at Clement Street. Please welcome Tamara Palmer.
So excited to be at Green Apple. Thank you so much.
So excited to have you.
This is actually our first in-person gathering for Music Book Club. We usually do author conversations over Zoom. If you want to check any of those out, we're at musicbook.club. And I wanted to welcome SKIZ to San Francisco. You just got here a few hours ago. And this book is brand new, so I know that most of you may not have had a chance to read it yet. So I was lucky enough to get a galley copy, and I read it and savored it really slowly over the last couple of months, and I'm really excited to talk to you about this very impressive body of work. But first, I want to say congratulations because it just came out.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you've been on a book tour, so I'd love to hear about how that's been going last few days, last week or so.
Well, first of all, let me just send a shout out to all of you. I love Bay Area 51. This is like my spiritual home. Always love coming back here. Got a lot of friends here. I see a lot of friends out there in the audience. And thanks for coming out and supporting tonight. Thanks to my girl T Money here, Tamara, who I've known for a long time, both as a hip hop writer and a food writer. And she just took me to amazing dinner at a Korean restaurant right across the street. What's it called? Just to give
It's
them
called
a shout out.
Umma, which means mom in Korean.
Real good.
Literally right across the street, so if you ever have a chance.
And of course, thanks to Green Apple Books. I mean, couldn't have done it without them. Support independent every step of the way, you know. Don't go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble. This is where you get the real stuff, right? So I thought I might start off the evening by reading a little excerpt from the book, if I may. I don't want to bore people, but just to give you a little taste of the book, Chronicles of Doom. And this excerpt is from it's from chapter 9. It's called Suspended Animation. Let me set it up for you, okay? Following the untimely passing of his brother Dingalizwe, aka Subrock, and getting dropped by his record label, Doom dropped out of sight for several years as he found himself unmoored, depressed, and trying to figure out what to do with his life. Biding time in a rented apartment in Manhattan with his other brother Dimbaza and doing a lot of thinking and psychedelics, his money finally ran out and he had no choice but to return to his father's house in Long Island. So this is where the chapter excerpt will start. Quote, so 1995, I guess we're in Freeport again, says Dimbaza. My father bought a crappy house, a piece of work, but it was a house and we can always go there, right? So he's basically living back at his dad's house, speaking of Doom, unquote. The younger Dumoulin refers to this period as his brother's, quote, John Coltrane phase, as he was spending a lot of time around the house doing little else besides reading a lot, doing little else besides reading and a lot of thinking, accompanied by daytime drinking and a jazz station tuned to the abstract stylings of Train, Pharoah Sanders, and Ornette Coleman. Quote, we drinking liquor that we stole from my uncle, says Dimbaza. We seen those bottles sitting there at my uncle's fucking bar since we little as hell, and you know he ain't drinking that shit, unquote. So the brothers helped themselves, switching from psychedelics to scotch. While it may have seemed like Doom was tuned out, he was always at least subconsciously affected by his environment, especially whatever information or stimuli he was receiving. Later on, he would observe, quote, people like Ornette Coleman or John Coltrane chose to go in a different direction that people couldn't accept, but now their stuff's seen as classic. That helped to show me that even if people don't get what I'm doing now, they'll get it eventually, unquote. But despite having his basic studio set up, he was still not inspired to create. Quote, Doom is in a low right now musically, according to Dimbaza. He wasn't making music. Knowing his brother only too well, he felt an obligation to remedy the situation. One day, while messing around on the turntables looking for samples, Dimbaza queued up a copy of the Spinners' Mighty Love album from 1974. Dropping the needle on the second song on side 1, Ain't No Price on Happiness, his ears instantly perked up. The song's opening bars sounded to him like a dope loop. When he brought it to Doom's attention, however, his brother initially brushed him off. Quote, I was like talking to Doom and he sounded down, and during this conversation, because it was a very bluesy time, for both of us, he's trying to talk like he ain't, he don't got no music, says Dimbaza, who pressed him to listen to what he had found. Quote, I got him out of that bluesy conversation to come over to the record player and listen to the sample, he says. And thank fucking God he heard what I heard and immediately started working on it. He didn't let his Debbie Downer attitude be like, it's dope, but I'm going to work on it in the morning. He started working on it and he made Go With The Flow. Doom paired the spinner's loop with the staccato drum track of Cool G Rap and Polo's Truly Yours from the album Road to the Riches, Cold Chillin' 1989. In the song's opening ad-libs, G-Rap says, "Go with the flow," which Doom also samples, explaining the title of the track as well. Though the songs Dead Bent and Gastrolls were subsequently credited as being the first official MF Doom recordings, both songs were originally recorded in 1994 during the Black Bastard sessions, according to Dimbazla. Go with the flow, he says, quote, kind of came after that. And that's when he started accumulating songs, end quote. It marked a definite breakthrough for his brother, the first time in a while that he approached music with renewed zeal and energy. But if there was an even more important eureka moment for Doom during that summer back in Freeport, he revealed it to journalist and label owner Pete Augustin, who I was with last night in LA, many years later. Quote, "Summertime, it was a beautiful day out and I'm trying to think of shit," he said. "It just hit me one day. If I was to come back, it would have to be as Doom." It just popped in my head like, if I ever get a chance to really do it again, that's how I would do it. On the surface level, on the public level, unquote. Doom, of course, had been his nickname since childhood, a shortened version of his last name. But in a different context, it also connected him to the Marvel supervillain, Dr. Doom. He further elaborated, quote, "You know, in a lot of ways, it prevents a lot of bullshit from happening. Like a lot of bullshit associated with this particular genre of music. You know what I mean? Paparazzi, the haters, whatever fucking bullshit. In any other writing job, you don't get this shit. But this rap shit, it's almost like people expect you to be the dude you're writing. Like, I'm a writer, yo. I write for different characters. Know what I'm saying?" End quote. As if a switch had flipped in his mind, he acknowledged the important distinction between himself, the person known as Daniel Dumoulin, and the character he was portraying. Doom had arrived at this conclusion by digging deep and analyzing the essence of rap's appeal. Quote, "So I'm like, I take a look back at that shit and I say, okay, what is it that people like about what we do? It's rhyming, the way we fuck with the words on the beat. None of that other shit in between matters at all," he said, citing trivialities like where you're from or what you're wearing. Quote, "So I'm like, if people want to hear raw rhymes, and the iller the rhymes, the better, you could come with anything and get the light, catch the wreck. So I'm going to test that theory. Let me change my name, all that, come out as a totally different motherfucker, totally new style, not ride the coattails of KMD. I mean, there was a lot of good stuff that we did, but I wanted to just go in another direction. So, all right, boom, you do the Doom and see how the public takes it," end quote. Like a spark of light illuminating the darkness, such a realization proved a major turning point. Though still broke and without any way to put out his music, he had found a way forward, adding, quote, "I'm totally designing the character from scratch, but to me, I was having fun," unquote. He probably hadn't admitted as much in years. So that was like almost like the origin moment of MF Doom.
Thank you for that, first
Sure.
of all. Your writing style is very lyrical in itself. It seemed to me when I was reading that there was not really a word that was out of place. Like, is this something that you obsess over, or what is your writing process?
Well, thank you very much for that, but I got to say that the editing process was pretty rigorous too. Like I had usually when you sell a book to a publishing company, an editor buys that book and he's assigned to you for the course of that. Halfway through doing this Doom book, my editor left the company somehow, so I was assigned to the publisher of the company. So it was pretty heavy for me. But he did. We had a pretty rigorous editing process, and I like that because coming from being a journalist, we both used to write for the same magazines back in the day, and that's a part of the whole process of writing. The editor kind of shapes the piece. And we used to even have fact checkers back in the day. That was an even more important thing, you know. A lot of the fact checking I had to do myself for this, which was that was tough. This is, you know, there was a lot. This was meticulously researched because of the fact that Doom is not alive. You know, it was kind of. I had a little trepidation, you know, doing this book because obviously there's a lot of fans, his family, and anytime you do something about someone who's not alive to defend themselves, you got to be very careful about what you print. So I had to be very careful and, like, you know, do the due diligence and all of that stuff. But yeah, I like to write, and this book took 3 years to write. It was a full-time project. I didn't work on anything else. And to me, that's a luxury, you know, because, like, pretty much my whole career, I've been wearing so many hats and, like, doing so many things at once. But to do a book like this, you got to really take it seriously. And I did it. I took it seriously. I took it slow, and I really put a lot into it. So.
And when did the genesis of the idea happen? Was it after his passing?
Yeah, I heard, just like all of you heard, I heard on December 31st, 2020, and I was just shocked. Because this guy, Doom and I are contemporaries. He's a couple years younger than me. It's really uncanny that we did not run into each other in life, because we ran in the same circles in New York hip hop. You know, I was there the whole course of the 90s. I was one of the early writers for The Source, and I used to cover, you know, all of that. So I met pretty much anyone who's an MC in New York. So it's really strange that we never crossed paths. But yeah, before this, I was working on a book called From the Streets of Shaolin, the Wu-Tang Saga, which came out in 2021, and I was just about to hand in the manuscript for that when I heard of Doom's passing. And then, like, that first week of January, there were all these podcasts out about Doom, and I was just, like, transfixed. I'm sure you guys were listening to them too. And I was like, that's when I was reacquainted with his whole story, and I was like, wow, this guy has got an incredible story. He's an incredible person. He definitely deserves a book, you know. So that's really when I started the research for this.
And one thing you may know if you're a big fan, but if you're not, you will learn the connection between Doom and Wu-Tang. So in a way, this is almost, would you even consider this somewhat of a companion piece to your previous book in that way?
You know what? I would, because probably Wu-Tang is probably my all-time favorite group, okay? And like you said, they have a very similar story, because RZA and GZA of Wu-Tang, like the two elder members, both had major label record deals before Wu-Tang, and they were both dropped and treated harshly, just like Doom was, you know, with his major label deal. So these guys came back. They kind of, you know, went back to the streets, got their people together, and they came back on the independent route. They released Protect Your Neck independently. That blew up. And then they were able to kind of dictate the terms of their own deal. And I think with Doom, you see a very similar story where this guy was, you know, it's like the doors were open to him as a teenager. He happens to know Search and Pete Nice from Third Base. They put him on a track on their debut album, which happens to be the Gas Face, which is like the hit single from that album. And all of a sudden, Doom is thrust into the spotlight. You know, he's not even Doom then; he's Zev Love X. And then he and his brother, you know, and Onyx formed KMD. They put out one album that's well received. Sub Rock dies. They lose their deal. Doom disappears. He reinvents himself. He comes back bigger than ever. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of parallels. And if you were in New York in the 90s, Wu-Tang cast a huge shadow. Everyone was influenced by Wu-Tang. And you see in the book that even Doom himself was like a serious Wu-Tang fan. And in fact, he did not want to he always wanted to put the mask on as Doom, but initially he was wearing a stocking cap over his face. And he didn't even do that until Ghostface stopped wearing the stocking cap. Because remember when Wu-Tang first came out, no one saw Ghostface, he had the stocking cap. And Doom was like, oh man, I want to do that. But I can't bite Ghost, you know? So it's like, you hear about that in the book, so yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of parallels, so that's...
Another one is you talk about how he was influenced by the world building around Wu-Tang and the kung fu aesthetic and so forth, and Doom applied that into world building as related to Godzilla, and you talk about that a little bit.
The mythology, right? Yeah, like, well, everyone knows that Wu-Tang kind of, exploited their whole connection with kung fu flicks, because that's a part of hip hop culture, kung fu flicks, pro wrestling, even Doom brought the cartoons in. And the comic books. I mean, comic books have always been in hip hop, but come on, we all love cartoons too. That's like, if you're a 70s kid or 80s kid, it was all about like Saturday morning cartoons and all of that stuff. So Doom kind of brought that in. But with the Godzilla, Doom had a partner called MF Grimm, you might remember. And together these guys conceived of a crew based on Wu-Tang called Monster Island Czars, okay? And this was going to be like all the MCs they knew would take on different monster names from the Godzilla movies, and it was really patterned on Wu-Tang, and they actually made it happen. That album came out, Monster Island Czars. Doom was King Ghidorah in that, and Grimm was Jet Jaguar, and those. I've since gone back and watched all those Godzilla films, and they're great, especially like the Toho Godzilla. And I do a pretty deep dive into the Godzilla movies because there's a lot of mythology that Doom extracted from that. And not just the mythology, like some of the soundtracks of these movies, all of a sudden you're listening to them and you hear like a Doom song and it's like, oh, all right. And it's like, who back then was sampling Godzilla movies or like foreign movies? For Doom, he was like looking for like weird sample sources that no one had tapped into, and he found it in the cartoons and the Godzilla movies and the comic book stuff. So it's like that. There's a whole section in the book called, well, the book is divided into 5 sections: the man, the myth, the mask, the music, the legend. And in the myth section, I go into all of the kind of influences that shaped Doom. So that was
a real education for me, and probably anybody who doesn't know it about that whole world.
Yeah,
gives you an entry point to explore more, which is another great.
And also obviously the Marvel universe was a huge thing because, and I didn't even really know this before studying the book. I was a comics book kid, but I was into weird stuff like Jonah Hex and Sergeant Rock. I don't know if you know those, but they were like kind of like surreal. Jonah Hex was like a surrealist Western, and same with Sergeant Rock. It was like a World War II thing, but it was like really kind of surreal. One thing that Doom got from the Marvel universe was this whole concept of the flawed superhero, kind of the anti-hero. Is he good or is he bad, Like Dr. Doom, which is obviously his namesake, because like his mother, his name is Doomale, so his mother used to call him Doom for short. And I found out that all the kids in school, everyone who knows Doom, like who knew him before he blew up, knows him as Doom, or his family knows him as Daniel. But he had such an affinity for this character, Dr. Doom, that I had to lay out the Dr. Doom origin story, because you can just, I don't want to make explicit connections, but you can just see it. You can just see it in the thing. So this is a guy who was like, he was a conceptualist, which is kind of rare in hip hop. Like this guy who like took these different forms and he's like, all right, I'm going to use this concept of the anti-hero, like that's his whole thing. Definition: supervillain, a killer who loves children, one well skilled at destruction as well as building. It's like, is he he's not totally bad. He's not totally good. So.
And Marvel recognized him. Was it while he was alive? Did he get to know that, or was that after his passing?
I think it was after his passing. Yeah.
So he was mentioned in a Doctor Doom
comic, or yeah. I think they quoted some lyrics in there. Does anyone know for sure?
I just know Marvel did a Doom
comic. Oh, they used that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the one shot.
Someone said Marvel did a Doom comic. Yeah.
Amazing.
And like the have you seen that Gladiator mask popcorn bucket now that they have? It's kind of funny because Doom stole the mask from the Gladiator movie, and now Gladiator's kind of using the mask to sell their stuff. So it's a full reversal.
And you have this beautifully illustrated cover. Can you talk about the artist?
Oh man, this is my man L'Amour Supreme, who you might recall from the Czarface covers. He's the illustrator for Czarface, and I really like the eyes. I think he really nailed the eyes as far as like Doom. If you guys know the Mad Villainy cover where he's got that same kind of expression, it's this really penetrating look. Yeah, this is all L'Amour Supreme. He was at the launch party in Brooklyn, and he did like some special artwork. He was signing books with me, and he was just like drawing people like.
Oh wow!
For like 250 people.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, incredible.
Oh, by the way, there's a little secret too in this book that I'd like to show people. If you take the dust jacket off, I didn't even know this.
Oh, I didn't even do that. Oh,
That's
that's
massive.
Oh, that's dope.
So. Yeah, L'Amour Supreme. That was
amazing. So, one observation I had when I was reading the book is that this is not it's loving and it's reverent, but it's not a fawning portrayal. You do go into his, some shady business moves that he made in the music industry, and you talk about one thing that I think is brilliant where he had other people perform shows for him, just sent them off in a mask just to see what would happen. I'm curious about his wife's reaction to the book and family members. How has this been received by them?
Okay, so the book is unauthorized, okay, which means that the estate had nothing to do with it. I didn't have to get their permission to do it. They're not getting anything from it. It's an unauthorized book, and I think the best music biographies are unauthorized because as a writer, as an artist, just like Doom wouldn't be down for censorship, or I'm not down for censorship of my work, and I demand like full creative control, just like Doom would of his work. So this is just a lone man myself who's a fan. I also happen to be a journalist, and I know how to write a book. So I was the sole force behind this project. Subsequently, I have, like the first two author copies I got, I sent to Jasmine, who's Doom's wife, and I sent to Sadiq, who's his manager, just so I want them to know what I'm doing. I'm not trying to hide anything that I'm not ashamed of what I did here. I'm actually very proud of it, and I think they would appreciate it too, So, in order to form a full portrait of someone, you really need to be able to do that. Because I'll give you an example, like the Prince documentary for Netflix. I was reading an article about it. The estate was obviously involved in that, and they supplied a lot of the footage. But guess what? They didn't approve the final cut. So you know what? We're probably never going to see that Prince movie. 9 hours of like great stuff, man. Like. Can you believe that?
I just want somebody to leak some of it.
I mean, maybe it will be, but it's like, so it's like that type of situation, So I was, as you said, I tried to be as respectful as possible, but Doom's not a saint, man. He told us all he was the supervillain, come on. So he's going to be doing some dastardly things, and I think people want to hear about that stuff too. You know, like one of the big things I found out, which is really not a big deal to me, is that Doom sold drugs. What? Wow. He wouldn't be the first rapper to sell drugs. He is the first rapper not to brag about it, though. You know?
Or rat himself out.
Yeah, exactly. He's not a rap snitch.
He did a lot of drugs.
He did a lot of drugs. He did a lot of psychedelics.
Mescaline, you said, was his drug of choice.
Yeah, and as someone who has done a lot of psychedelics myself, I suddenly understand Doom a whole lot better. You know, it's like, yeah, this guy was a scientist. He was a wizard. You know, he was into. We think of him as this like really funny, kind of wacky, quirky MC who's like, you know, who's got these crazy technical skills, but he was also very subversive, you know, and behind all of that happy-go-lucky stuff, there's like some real dark stuff happening. You know, if you know what to look for, he dropped some references and stuff like that. So, you know, it's definitely a part of Doom, you know. And one thing I found out about him that the public doesn't really know about, well, they will now, is that he was really into like esoteric information and this whole body of like metaphysical, spiritual knowledge. He was into crystals. He used to build like geodesic domes like Buckminster Fuller. He was the mask he had. No one's ever seen behind the mask. He had like crushed amethyst and copper spirals at the third eye, and I remember one of the label guys, the guy from Lex, Tom Brown, told me that Doom got this piece of Mexican amethyst and he kind of like broke it in half and he gave half to Tom. He said, "If you ever need to reach me, use this." You know, it's like he was on some next shit. You know?
He also spent time in YouTube rabbit holes, conspiracy theories, and stuff like that. Do you think he would have been into the conspiracy theories of the day?
Of course. Like the whole Operation Doomsday, he got that from a Sidney Sheldon novel, The Doomsday Conspiracy. And you know what that book is about? It's basically based on, it's a fictional retelling of Roswell, about the UFO crash, but it happens in Switzerland. And even on Operation Doomsday, the album, he mentions Sidney Sheldon. So like some of my research was like this. Okay, he mentions Sidney Sheldon. Okay, like what does Sidney Sheldon have to do with anything? So I looked up Sidney Sheldon, I looked up his books, and right around that time, he had written this Doomsday Conspiracy book. And in the book, it's like Operation Doomsday is this conspiracy where they're trying to kill all these witnesses who saw this UFO. So that's just like that's like one of Doom's sly references, you know? But there's a lot of lyrics of his like that just like make you do research, you know? And it's his, if you look, his lyrics are filled with these references, and they just point the way that you know, knowledge that he's been kind of researching or other stuff. And of course, like, you know, Dr. Malachi York, the kind of was his spiritual mentor as a teenager. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who was kind of known in New York in the 70s and 80s. First of all, it was really the 5% Nation of Islam that had a lot of influence on hip hop back then. Nation of Gods and the Earths, all the Wu-Tang members are all 5%ers. And this Dr. York character was kind of in that same thing, but he was all over the place as far as his beliefs. And, you know, Doom and his brother Sub were part of that Ansaru community. And it's funny because Dr. York was also, he was a spiritual teacher and also R&B singer. He put out all these like 80s R&B, you know. And there's another thing. Ding, Doom's in the 80s R&B, right? Like, so you start seeing a lot of crossover stuff. on these?
Yesterday, I had a chance to review next week. The 20th anniversary edition of Food is coming out, and I don't know if you've had a chance to see the material that's new.
I haven't yet.
Release, but it's the same arrangement of the original album, and then there's an additional maybe 10 tracks that are comprised of remixes and unreleased interview clips where he talks about the evolution from X to Doom. He talks about the making of the album. And we find out in this book that this album came out in 2004, but he had the concept to do a food-themed work like 10 years before that, right? So a lot of this stuff, and also we learned that there's not much cutting room material that he used, a lot of what he had. But do you think he did that kind of long-term thinking with more of his discography, or is that just sort of coincidental that might have been an idea lingering in his head?
Well, think about it. Like, he disappeared. He lost his deal in May of '94. Okay, he resurfaces on Bobito's Fondle on I think the first single he did was like end of '97. So we have like 3 years where he was kind of gone out of the scene. And during that time, can you imagine the amount of like just, he was just doing nothing but thinking, drugs and thinking. So imagine like the imagination of this guy. It was just running wild, it's like he came up with all these concepts and he would tell people, like Del, the funky Homo sapien, or Prince Paul, yo, I'm gonna wear a mask and no one's gonna know my name and I'm just gonna still be able to have a personal life. And he's a guy who had these crazy visions and crazy ideas, but he actually executed them. It's one thing to have these thoughts, but to actually do it, that's pretty amazing. So he actually did it. That's the answer.
We have about 5 minutes, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience, which I'm sure are going to be amazing questions. I can sense the knowledge in the room already. Is there anything you want to talk about before we transition to that?
I would just say that, there's so much to say. Let's take some questions and then.
You want to just go straight to questions?
Yeah, unless do you have any other questions?
Maybe we can ask a few after that, but yeah. Anybody want to ask?
Yes.
Back to the research, because I'm learning things in this book that I had no idea about. Even living through the death of Scott LaRock, I never heard that story about D Nice and what happened.
Right.
On the Doom side of it, like, how do you research something like his time in the UK, the JJ Doom and Born Like This?
Born Like This, yeah.
Yeah, like that time period. Like, how did you get that research? And if it's like articles and other things that you're pulling from, how do you then weave that into the story?
Okay, that's a great question. Working on this book was tough. I'm not gonna lie, and it was a daunting task for me because I'm an old school journalist. Like I've interviewed tons of people, and that's how I like to work. I like to interview people directly and hang out with them and stuff like that. So to do a book on someone I've never met and never interviewed, it was a daunting task. Okay, so
and a private person like that.
Yeah, and such a private person too, right? But so the way I started was, all right, let me access every open source interview on Doom that I can find. Okay, there's plenty of them on the internet, on YouTube. I think between like 2000 2005, he actually was doing a lot of interviews. Another thing that I had going for me was the fact that I'm also artist myself, and I had a label called Word Sound Recordings. I used to run out of my crib in Brooklyn. And, we put out 65 records, 65 independent records just out of my living room over the span of like 15 years. So I know everyone else who's doing an independent label, especially hip hop stuff. You know, I knew pretty much everyone that Doom worked with as far as that. So I knew those people would be easy to get to. So that's where I started my interviews, and then I started researching Doom's friends who I could talk to. Of them, I approached all of them. Some of them didn't want to talk. Some of them I really had to convince to talk. You know, and you know, it's a matter of these are old school journalism. You know, I'm like I went to journalism school like 30 years ago, and this is what they used to teach us. You know, like you got to hit the streets and talk to people, and you know, when you interview people, you have to put them at ease. You know, there are tricks, there are ways to get people to talk to you. You know, so I just used all of my skills. It was real. You know, it required everything I had, and I was very lucky to be able to speak to some of Doom's family members, not his wife, who's very reticent, but his younger brother Dimbaza, who was like 3 years younger than Doom. We had like several like 5-hour conversations, and we could have talked for longer. This guy really he was very forthcoming about stuff, and he actually told me that Doom told him at a certain point, you're gonna have to let people know about all this stuff, you know? So Doom knew that his time was limited, you know? He did know, and I've heard this from other people too. And then like some people didn't want to go on the record, like this girl, Courtney, who was his assistant for several years. She was really nice and I knew her, but for her, it was too soon after Doom's death. She couldn't talk about it. You know, I can totally understand that. I've lost family members. I've lost people close to me, and you have to be respectful of people. Like, you know, it's like people are grieving. You know, I lost a nephew when he was 17. And it's like something that you never get over. I mean, I'm sure everyone's lost a family member. It's something you never get over. You learn to live with it, and that's Doom too. He lost his brother, who they were like twins, you know,
and his son,
much later on. But the loss of his brother is really that's what started MF Doom. I think if Subrock was still alive today, we wouldn't be talking about MF Doom, you know. So it's like. So as far as the research, yeah, 50% open source, what's out there, what everyone else can access, and then 50% my contacts, and you know, not just people I knew, but just being in that independent hip hop scene and knowing it well and knowing all the people who are involved. I think that really made a difference. So. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, for sure.
But it is meticulous work, weaving it into a narrative.
Yeah.
Because it could have just been a oral history, you know. I don't like that myself, because what I'm proud of in this book is the context that I give. Because you're not just, like you said, you're not just learning Doom's story. You have the whole history of independent hip hop labels in here. You have a whole history of like certain things, old school hip hop, like the KRS thing. That was totally a serious moment for Doom, you know, like he respected these older MCs, you know. He's from that era. He's actually from that era. He was born in 71. Yeah. I'm 68, you know, so it's like, yeah. I felt a real simpatico with him.
Yeah, I was in high school when Scott LaRock died.
Okay.
I remember.
All right, like, 87. Yeah. Because also, Scott LaRock was a giant at that time. Yeah. You know, he was like a Dr. Dre character at that time. He could have been...
Said G too.
Yep.
Legendary.
Yep.
68?
Yeah.
Wow. Do not look it.
70.
Wow. Good genes.
Any other? Yeah.
I have one. I agree with you guys' sentiment earlier. Like as a fan of music and artists, I'd rather read something unauthorized. I guess now the book kind of just came out, but do you anticipate any kind of pushback or criticism from like rabid fans or whoever that might not be familiar with your pedigree for like putting out something that hasn't been blessed by these things?
You know what? Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Like, I can't control how people accept this. You know, it's like, all I know is that I did the best I could possibly do on it. And as long as I'm cool with myself, you know, everyone. I will tell you a little story though. This person will go unnamed, but he was a pretty big figure in the music industry, in the hip hop industry, in like the 80s and 90s. And I invited him to the LA thing last night. And I've never met the guy in my life, okay? And I just over social media said, you know, I'm going to be doing this thing. And he totally just poured hate all over. He was like, you know, basically, fuck you for doing this book. And I fucking hated your Wu-Tang book, too. Fuck you,
I
buddy.
know exactly who it is. I don't know who it is, but I bet you I know who it is.
And I could only laugh because it's like, I don't even exist at that vibration, you know? I'm like, I'm up here, it's like, what is this? What is he on? He's on, you know, like, so, you know, you have to have a thick skin anyway, you know? It's like, I know not everyone's going to like it. I've gotten plenty of bad reviews already, like the Washington Post review. You should go back and check that. But, you know,
it's my subscriptions.
I endorse you, you know.
But, yeah, the only person whose opinion I am concerned about is Jasmine's, because I don't want to step on her feet or her kids at all. And I purposely kept all mention of Doom's kids out of this. He had 5 kids. He lost one. We all know that. His first kid he had when he was still in high school while he was in KMD. And to his credit, he raised that kid himself, because the baby's mother was a flight attendant, so she was in and out of town. So Doom took DJ and raised him, and DJ actually I heard is now like 34, 35. He's an artist in LA, so he's doing his thing too.
Musical artist or a visual artist?
I think a visual artist, yeah. And then he's got 3 girls, younger. Yes.
Yeah, it seems like it's a really well-researched book, and I'm really excited to get into it. But he's also got such a complex story with so many deep references. What did you feel like were some of the hardest parts to research in the book, and what are some of the blind spots that you still have about the story?
The hardest part was both the period from 94 to 97 when he was kind of dropped out of sight, and also that the first couple of years in England when after he had been deported. There's not much there. Luckily, I was able to speak to his roommate in England, who used to work at the label Lex, and then Dimbaza, as I said, filled in a lot of the missing years story. But I really wanted to talk to Grimm. Grimm didn't want to talk to me, and he was like, "Where'd you get my number from?" And I was like, but you know, it's like all these people have spoken publicly, like even Keo, the guy who made the mask, he was like, oh, well, if Jasmine is down, I'll do it, but otherwise not. Like him, Bobito. But these guys are on the record. You know, so it's like, I don't know who they're trying to fool, because it's like they've already spoken about this on the record. So why not, you know, make it official for the book? I guess they were kind of respecting Jasmine's wishes or whatever, because she's a very private person too. Like Doom found like his soulmate there. You know, they're both like really on the low. But I think now, like if you look at the Gastrol site, they're like putting out a lot of new material and merchandise and stuff like that, which is a great thing. And I think with the release of the book now, there's like more kind of recognition of Doom. So I think it's going to help. I think it's going to help their efforts too. You know what I mean? We're all trying to big up Doom in the end. You know, it's like I didn't set out to write like an exploitation book or like I didn't you know want to do a hatchet job on Doom. So
not that at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like I think they recognize that.
I think you've been in good company with authors like Dan Charnas, who wrote about Jake Dilla, and Julia Beverly, who wrote about Pimp C, and with both of them had some participation from some inner circle and family members, and others, wanted to make money off of it after it came out, and there were some maybe confrontations and things like that. So it's
didn't Charnas was authorized though, wasn't it?
No,
it wasn't.
No,
okay.
It should be because it's brilliant and authoritative.
But he spent years on that book.
Yeah, I just spent the afternoon with him like 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about this. So.
Was he on the music book club?
He was our first event. So
yeah,
like that's patron saint of music book club.
That's an incredibly well-researched book, and I should mention too that both Charnas and I are products of Professor Sam Friedman's book seminar at Columbia Journalism School. Like, you have to apply to be in it, but you learn how to write a book proposal, and he teaches you about the industry and everything like that. And there's been so many authors to come out of that class. Like, I was a 92 graduate of that, and I know that there's just like tons of authors to come out of that class. Like, Charnas came after I did, but
that's amazing. Good dude. Anybody else?
No more questions? Okay, there you go.
Your comment about the Godzilla stuff kind of made me think that Doom kind of straddles that time between like the Wild West of sampling and more kind of recent sample clearance era stuff. And I wonder if there was that story about Pharoah Monch. He did Simon Says, and I think he really paid a price on that. And I wonder if either Doom escaped that kind of stuff, or if you have any kind of stories about him coming up against sample clearance stuff.
I kind of kept that on the low because I don't want to blow up his spot. You know what I mean? But that's a very good point. Like, that Pharoah Monch sample for Simon Says, dun 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 dun. Yeah. That's from a Godzilla movie too. I think Doom sampled from that same movie, as a matter of fact. But Raucous was up here. Monch's label Raucous was like selling a lot of copies. Doom was like kind of under the radar at the time. It's just like the heads were listening to it. Yeah. So like he was able to escape through a lot of that stuff. And now, as we say, now he's at a point where like, all these big companies are paying homage to him. It's like, so I think he's safe now. Okay. You know what I mean? And plus, I don't think they're going to go after someone who's passed away, but I think it was just the fact that was such a huge hit at the time, but that's a great point.
Yeah, he probably didn't make any money on that.
Yeah, I know.
I doubt the villain cared about copyright laws.
He didn't give an F about copyright laws, really. He sampled everything. Whatever. He like the missing notebook rhymes that were from Adult Swim. I mean, that was just straight up cash grab by the villain. He was putting out stuff he had no right that someone else produced. Oh, I'm gonna put this up. But at that time, I think he really needed the money. There was a lot of health issues going on. His kids had health issues. So I never passed judgment against him in this book.
No, you portray him as a working class dude that like the next project was the next hustle, and
exactly.
That's all he cared about.
Yeah. And people ask me, what about his homophobic lyrics and stuff like that? I'll let Doom explain it away in the book because he does a great job. Like,
I still wasn't totally convinced it's still a little homophobic for my opinion. But, as we see from these books, that there are real humans behind the art, and humans have
flawed characters, of course.
We have time for one more question, so make it really, really smart. No pressure. Scary. The gentleman in the back who knows so much about music, do you have any questions? Nope. Okay.
I was going to ask if you know of any unearthed music of his that's going to be released at all. Is there any stuff that he left in, like?
I've heard of a lot of things. One thing that I'm kind of waiting for, I guess you guys are too, is the Doom Starks.
Yeah.
because I know that's been done for a long time. I know people who have copies of it, and I think the problem is money, you know. But then I heard, because Devin Horowitz from Nature Sounds is the guy who kind of shepherded that project, and I heard that he had some investor who was, but that's just hearsay. But that's one, the Doom Starks. That would definitely be big if it came out, right? And I know that Doom did a lot of other stuff, because even in the discography that I have in here is already out of date, because I come across like stuff on YouTube all the time, like new
That's
stuff.
a pretty extensive discography that you
It
have
is,
on
but then I'm like, damn, this is not in the discography. You know, it's like, I like to be a completist about that stuff, but it's tough with stuff like this, right? Because Doom did a lot of side dealing. Doom was the kind of guy who would even double dip, like sell two beats to the same beat to different people, and you gotta love that, you know.
I was gonna say, you kind of end up rooting for him.
He has the license after he's been effed over by the industry so much. Man, he has the license to do whatever he wants, you know. Because I'm coming from the independent side too, so it's like, I remember when I sold Psychoanalysis, the Prince Paul album, to Tommy Boy, and they didn't even put my logo on it when it came out. I was like so pissed off. That's like the least that they could have done. You know, it was in the contract too, but they didn't do it. So F all these major labels, man.
That's a great record.
Thank you.
That is a great record.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, thanks.
And
Yeah.
everybody who joined us online.
And I'm gonna be signing books right back here, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
You wanna?
Cool. I got you. Can we give one more hand for SKIZ? Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
is a delight. I'm so glad.
Thanks
that
for
y'all were
thanks
here.
for coming out, man. This makes me feel good to see in my spiritual home of San Francisco that I got all this support. So thank you.
We love to see it. That is exactly right. SKIZ is going to be signing right here at the back desk where the sign is, where the copy of the book is. You can find books at the front register. You can buy them there, bring them back here to have them signed. And if you have any other questions, let me know. If not, we will see you next time. Thank you so much.